Hey everybody, Scoutcrafter here again. TGIF, it's Friday. Thank goodness you made it through another week. And, Fridays, I always like Fridays, even though I didn't get a lot of weekends off. And most of my career, 32 years, I only had weekends for maybe 2 picks, which means not even a year out of 32 years. I always had Wednesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Wednesday off. The MTA was a 24-hour, 7-day operation. So, it was tough. Weekends was a scene. And I never wanted weekends. Once you get used to working, having weekdays off, it is a nice thing because, the weekends, a lot of things get crowded and whatnot. But the one thing I always did like Fridays, because the guys that had the weekends off were always in a good mood. And also the bosses would go home early. And, when the boss is away, it's just so much better, isn't it? The same work gets done, but there's nobody looking over your shoulder. Isn't that something? It's like they think that they're by them watching you, you're going to do more. But the truth of the matter is, a good boss knows that you treat your workers right and they'll work right for you. Anyway, today we got a couple things to do. We had a good week so far. Then we had a nice restoration on Monday with the hammer. Tuesday, Wednesday we did the clamps. Love doing those. Those came out great. And today we got to do a little bit of shop maintenance because we've been tearing up the machines here. So let's get to doing that and talk a little bit about it. A couple of videos ago, somebody in the comments had asked me, he said, how come you don't have your grinder or your buffer bolted down? Because, they're flopping all over the place and stuff. And I got to tell you, we tend to put our shops according to where the power is, where the outlets are. Not everybody, it's not like we're designing it from the ground up, hopefully my next shop will be. But right now, let me show you why there's a method to my madness, why I have the grinders and buffers the way I do. And I'll show you what I mean. Now, this unit was my dad's unit, and it was always here, and that's where I kind of left it here. This is where it was always at the end of the bench. And I'll tell you why you want a wire wheel, a buffer at the end of the bench, because you want the wheel hanging off the end of the bench so that you can get larger items under the wheel. There's nothing, worse than having your buffer or a wire wheel here where you only have a couple inches. You really can't work with big items. So it's always nice to have it hanging over the edge or something like that. Yes, it's nice to have it bolted down too, but I have it on this piece of carpet here, and unless I really push hard against it, it's pretty stationary. However, I can switch it. I can always turn it at a 90 degrees, and I can get different, like the buffer wheel over here or something, which we're going to take off today, and I'll tell you why. Now, I've been using this for a few months now, ever since Joe's shop turned me on to it, but I was kind of the last on board to get this. The problem is that this kind of buffing wheel has, you can see the powder here. You see this here? That's all what happens when this wheel starts to degrade, when you're using it. It creates like a powder. And what happens is, this is what's called an open frame motor. You see there? You got these little vents in here. This is not the motor you want to have this kind of wheel on, because, abrasive dust can get sucked into there and just give you a world of problems. Also, it's right next to great-grandpa's vise here, and you see these rails and everything. They get covered with the dust, that wear and tear. I got to get this out of here. So I got to clean up the vise today. I got to vacuum out the motor, take this wheel off, put it on a closed frame motor. Now, here is an example of a closed frame where you see there's no vent holes in here, and this is great for anything that you're going to be kicking up dust or anything, because it's a sealed motor. The problem is that the RPM on here, you can see, is 3450. You can see that there? It's 3,450 RPM, which is too fast for, you really want something. They usually come in 2 speeds. It's either this or about half that, which is about 1750. And that's what my open frame motors are. So, unfortunately, I thought I was going to use this, but I see it's too fast. I'm not comfortable with. This is great for buffing. But for wire wheels or grind, it's just, it's too fast. You really want a slower speed because, when you're working with things that are happening that fast, you can really do damage to a product or an item before you realize what's going on. Now, here's my buffer that I use all the time, and I have to change the wheel. You can tell when the wheel starts to spread. You see this? The threads start coming out and things like that. When you get into, look at the dimension of that wheel. When it gets to this size, you really should, that's about the time you want to change it. And this is what it looks like new. So we're going to change this on here. But I still save this because you can always put this on the drill press, or if you have something dirty you want to do and you don't want to mess up your good wheel. But it is a slower, remember the surface speed, because it's a smaller wheel, it's not going to be as fast on the item that you're buffing, where this, because it'll give you a faster surface speed. So let's take this off and put on the... One important thing to remember is to see the hole size here. I get the buffing wheel that has a 1/2 inch hole here, or actually it's a little less, but you can see that when it fits on there, you don't have to have any kind of bushing or anything. This shaft here, you got to almost press it on, and that gives for a nice fit there. You don't need any bushing or anything. And then we just put the washers on. When I put the washers on, I make sure I use a thick, high-grade washer, not something that's going to bend in there. And I usually put a couple on there, because I don't want to have the nut too close to the inside there. So we'll put it on here. We'll try and center it here, and then we'll just give it a spin to make sure that these are pretty much centered, and when they are, we'll tighten it up with the wrench. Okay, we have the wheel changed. There's one thing you have to remember. When you first put these on, they're not going to be perfectly in balance. Don't try and go crazy about it, because as soon as you use this, as soon as you start buffing on something, after a while, it kind of finds its center, and then they'll smooth right out. So that's just fine the way it is now. Here we are. We mounted the brass brush on the side of this one. We're going to mount here. Now, if you notice, this here, the inside hole on here is larger than 1/2 inch. And if you see, if I tried to put it on here, there's a little bit of wiggle. First of all, this is a little bit worn. It's not worn out. It could still go down a little bit, but I have a new wheel here, so I'm going to put the new wheel on. And I want you to see what I did is I built it up here with a little bit of painter's tape. And you just put it on nice and tight. It makes for a good bushing. And then you just make sure that it's nice and firm when you press this on, just like that. And that's just the way you want it, you see? And now we'll tighten it up with the back, and then one thing you want to remember when using these do compress when you tighten down here. So if it does start to slip on you, you're going to have to keep it tight. That's why the widest washer you can get on here is, you can't use one of them little washers. You got to get a wide one here to keep it compressed so it won't spin. Now, the reason I have it set up this way is, you see how now I have all this room here to work over on one side because it's hanging over. Now, if I wanted to work on the brass brush over here, now you can see in less than 20 seconds, I just turned it, and now I have the brass brush hanging over this side with all this room. So that's the beauty of having it on the corner of a bench and clamped down instead of bolted down, because you want to have this over. Now, you can use a pedestal, but the pedestal has to be bolted down. A lot of times it gets in the way in the shop, and they have their problems too. I like mine a certain height, and they're usually too short for me, so this really works good for me. Okay, so let's say we close out this week with a nice restoration or just a cleanup of this here. This is a HD Smith. You can see here, this was their 660 model, and this was their number 5. Okay, number 5 screwdriver. So you can see the shape it's in. You can see the back. Look at the back. It's been banged on. The scales are, you can see, if you look sideways, you can see there's some depressions here. And, we'll try and fix it up, get it done. And of course, there is some dents and pitting and stuff. But it looks fairly straight. I don't know. We're going to have to wait till we get to the post wire brush and see where we're at. Okay, here we are at the post wire brush evaluation. Took off the patina. You can see here I don't know. It's hard to see if this thing's bent or not. It doesn't look, right. It looks like, but back then, I don't know. So, but we did get in here. We got all that stuff out of there, okay? All the rust and corrosion, but we didn't try and touch this because you don't want to get the wire brush near wood. Wire brush and wood do not go well together. It'll expose all the fibers, the grains. It'll really mess it up. For that, we go to the belt sander, and we also have to do this. So we'll take this off with the coarse belt sander, and then this with the fine, and also this with the fine. So let's go do that. Okay, here we are after the belt sanding and we didn't get to polishing yet because now we want to stain the handles, and you don't want to get any buffing compound on there, so we'll stain the handles, then we'll do the polishing later. But everything's coming out nice. This is what the back looks like before we hit it to the buffer. Okay, take out all the minute scratches, and so far it looks good, right? So let's get to staining the handles. I think gun stock. Now you know my favorite part. Remember what this screwdriver looked like before we started. And we are calling this project done. I know a lot of you wanted to see this screwdriver finish because it is such a lovely screwdriver, isn't it? You can see we put the black like it had from the factory behind the Smith, and here we have the improved 660 with the black in the background. The little red here, Scoutcrafter red behind the 5 on the tip. And you can see the handles here. Look at this one here. You know, everybody has a different side of wood, but look how nice that grain is on there. And so that's it. This is the HD Smith 660 patent applied for screwdriver. All polished out, right? Got rid of all the pits and everything. Reprofiled the tip. And it's just a beauty of a screwdriver, isn't it? This one, you know, I won't use this screwdriver, obviously. This will be just upstairs and with the rest of the collectible tools. But it was a nice looking screwdriver. And it actually, this little dip, believe it or not, helps when, you know, to turn a screw. So it's not just decorative. I mean, there is a functionality to it. And of course the back. You know, we can't forget the back because that's always one of my favorite parts, to really polish up the back so it looks nice. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this restoration. This one was a fun restoration to do, especially to finish up a week of good restorations today. And in closing, remember I told you that the mice, they're happy little creatures. Well, remember I told you they have a blast all winter and then I let them go in the spring? This is what I was talking about. So anyway, have a nice weekend. Take care now. Bye-bye.